everyone, Alexa Dunn here, and today I am doing at long last the long-awaited reacting to your unpopular writing and bookish opinions. This is slightly different, really a chapter 2, my own chapter of my last video like this, where I reacted to Kate reacting to your unpopular writing and author opinions, but I put out my own call for opinions. At this point, I know that was like 2 months ago. Author stuff, copy edits. The point is, here we are. It's spicy. And y'all had a lot of unpopular opinions. This video, I'm going through 30 odd some from the first 200 that you guys sent in. So yeah, there's definitely going to be more videos of this ilk because there's more to go through and more to say. And because we know this is gonna be a long one, let's jump right in. Starting with like general spicy writing related opinions. Too many people want to be writers. It's an unattainable dream like becoming a famous actor. There isn't enough space for all of us. How do we know if we're one of the majority who will never get published? Or how do we tell people we know that they're never getting published because the industry is tough and their writing just isn't good enough? A lot of us are probably just wasting our time. Maybe instead of inspirational content, Authortubers should be more realistic and tell people not to have any grand expectations. So we're just starting with an existential crisis. I love this. This is an unpopular opinion to express out loud, but yeah. But I mean, I'm someone who's talked about how tough the odds are, while at the same time not wanting to be discouraging, because the thing is, I can at least speak to the Authortuber part of this. I, of course, am a fan of the healthy dose of reality because then that basically gives the tools to those who want to look at that information and take a more pragmatic approach. But that said, I think the reason why we can't go all doom and gloom at this, especially from an advice-giving point of view, is you never know who you are reaching and at what point you are reaching them. And so yes, while it is true that the majority of writers won't make it, so to speak, if your metric of making it is, say, being traditionally published, being published at all, being successful at publishing, you always want to bear in mind, what if you're reaching that person who has something extraordinary to say, an extraordinary story, and your encouragement in this moment in time could be the thing that pushes them forward so they can make it to the end. So you really have to leave it to an individual level, that each person has to do their own kind of calculus, arithmetic, soul-searching journey. And yeah, it may be true the majority won't make it, but at least from my perspective, I still try to lead with pragmatic encouragement. Next, it's okay to write a sequel to an unpublished manuscript if you want to traditionally publish. I hear this constantly as a novice writer, and while I understand the reasoning, I feel that it helps me discover more about my characters and world and is good practice. You do you, boo. But yes, this is an unpopular opinion and one that I personally do not agree with, though I'm not going to come to your house with a pitchfork and like wag it at you like, no, you cannot. Do what you need to do. But the reason this advice exists is because pragmatically, too many of us have had the experiences of not getting an agent for a book or getting an agent but not selling a book. And you don't want to end up spending months and months, maybe years of your life writing hundreds of thousands of words that will never be published. And or let's say you sell the first book, your editor is going to have things they want to change and you can end up having to completely scrap and rewrite a sequel if you've already written it. That's where that advice comes from, so that is a little bit unpopular. Next, editing doesn't have to wait months. You can edit smaller things or tweak some things before tackling other issues pertaining to story. This definitely goes against the grain of popular advice, including advice I've given that you need to leave as much space as possible before you go in to do a really good developmental edit. I stand by that advice. But I agree with the spirit of this advice, at least in the sense that, honestly, when you end up writing on contract and you have deadlines and with publishing schedules, you do not get the grace of that time. So yeah, you can definitely edit with little to no time. For my last book, I only got a 3-week break and then I had to jump back into it. And this is actually a great unpopular opinion because it is something that you have to learn to do, but still ideally, time is great. The common writing advice, there are no new ideas, ideas don't matter, execution does, is not true, and quite frankly an excuse for creative laziness. Spicy. Of course there's probably no single trope that hasn't been used at some point in history, But that isn't the same as making a farm boy chosen one fantasy in 2021 that does nothing new. Yeah, I guess. Mostly writers like me give that it's not about ideas, it's about execution, because A, we've seen this in practice, but B, it's to take pressure off of writers so that they're not like driving themselves wacky. But I do actually agree with the opinion thrown in there at the end to say that we're creatively lazy, because something can be truly a little bit too tired, but then I would argue it's not simply execution, it's twisting the idea itself to make it stand out better so that your execution can carry it along, but that's an interesting one. You don't have to publish a book to be a good novelist. You can be talented and just not publish either indie or traditional. That is a really interesting opinion, one I don't fundamentally disagree with. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Some of the best writers I have encountered in the years and years were in fan fiction, and they have never published anything and don't seem to have any interest in doing so. So I do agree with this. But then I always, weep for the world that they don't get those books. Just writing doesn't actually improve your writing. You need to rewrite, research writing techniques, get feedback. Otherwise, your writing will never grow. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes improvement. Yeah, put that on a pillow. I totally agree with this one, and in fact have seen the phenomenon of people who are incredible drafters, who can draft quickly, can write a lot, who move from book to book to book. But if they never take the time to substantively edit their books, learn developmental editing and how to interact with feedback, and not just basic feedback, but qualified feedback that leads to deep revision. But it's true, someone can write 12 books, but if they never do the editing work on those books, their work isn't going to be better than someone who's only written 1 or 2 if that person does the revision work. So I agree. I don't like Story Genius or Save the Cat. They were well recommended on Authortube, BookTube. Story Genius in particular is very condescending towards pantsers, and I'm a plotter, so if I took offense, I can't imagine how a discovery writer would feel. Yeah, I mean, we covered the salty Save the Cat opinions in the last video, but on Story Genius, I'm inclined to agree. It's one of the reasons I have not picked it up, because I listened to an interview that the author did, a podcast, and she was slamming pantsers, and I was like, well, I probably am not the right audience for your book. So it's true, if a plotter feels that way, the shade is real. Authors who queried 50 agents or less and got an agent, usually their dream agent or a close second, or received very few rejections on their first round, have not actually been in the trenches and don't really understand the pain of rejection. I understand the place from which this salty, unpopular opinion is coming, but I do not agree with it. I understand it from the point of view of it really sucks when you have an author who had a dream experience. They queried 20 people, got 5 offers in less than a week, ended up with their dream agent, went on sub, sold in like 2 weeks, and now they're a bestseller. And it is true. Sometimes you see those authors try to relate to the rest of us, and you're like, I don't want you here, because it's rough out there. And it is becoming increasingly harder to have like good query stats and ratios and a dream experience. But I think the devil is in the details here. Like, why 50? I take it personally because I never queried that many agents. So do you think I've never experienced rejection and I can't relate to you at all? It's just as valid to query 20 people and 15 of them reject you. You could even have some really brutal rejections in there. It's gonna be similar to someone who queries more people, because it's the choice of how many people that you're going to query. The experience of rejection is valid either way. So I've never queried more than 30 people, but I racked up my fair share of rejections over 3 querying experiences, including one book that I abandoned completely because the querying experience was basically all rejections. Does that mean I'm not valid because in my singular querying experiences, I got an agent querying less than 30 people, someone who I consider to be a dream agent? Still got the rejections. And then you also have to consider that you're thinking only about querying. Someone can have a good experience querying and then submission takes over a year and 30 people reject them and they don't sell the book. I think it's a little dangerous to be zero-sum gamey about this kind of thing. But yes, we do not like the unicorns complaining. But yeah, unless you have the absolute, like I'm talking absolute unicorn experience, I don't think it's fair to say someone hasn't been in the trenches because their experience wasn't abominably terrible, slow, bad, a million rejections. Because it's down to different querying experiences. Like someone chose to query only 30 people, you chose to query 70. That's individual choices. You both went into the trenches and had your experience, and someone can do only the 30 and you can do your 70, and you can both end up without an agent and a ton of rejections, and you're still peers. And the last one here is one that I'm not personally going to pass comment on, but I thought was really important to share as an unpopular opinion that someone shared. As a Black writer, I feel there's implicit pressure on you to rep the struggle in all your art. If I write stories set in a post-racial society or without any racial commentary or with no BIPOC characters, I feel like it's lesser or that I'm betraying the cause. This is compounded by the fact that some people want to harangue white writers who write a Black main character if they don't do it to a T. So who's going to write those stories if I don't? Black people shouldn't feel implicit pressure to put racial commentary in a story if they feel it doesn't fit. This is a sentiment I have heard expressed quietly, but in a lot of places, especially privately. You are not alone in expressing this. This is pressure I see placed onto a lot of my friends, and you know, this is a theoretically unpopular opinion, but I think more people feel exactly the same way than people realize, and I wish we would have more open and constructive conversations about it, led by the people who it impacts the most. Next are bookish / booktube / YA opinions. YA needs to stop catering / marketing to adult tastes and target the actual YA demographic age range. Also got, it's fine for adults to read YA, but they shouldn't complain about the characters acting like teenagers. And publishing should make sure that YA books are written primarily for teenagers instead of catering to what adult readers may want. I totally agree. Both as a person who understands that a lot of YA isn't written for me or shouldn't be written for me, I specifically do write my books for YA readers and have very often seen the, oh, this read so juvenile, and I'm like, totally. And there's so many books flooding the market that exactly, you can tell when they're written for adults and they're not written for teenagers, and it's kind of annoying. I've talked a lot about my frustrations with how what I'll call lower YA or pure YA, the way that YA books used to be written, there's this huge gap in the market. And it doesn't mean write books the way we used to write them, because the category has evolved and there's some really beautiful evolution there. I definitely think we see where editors and marketing departments and whatnot, we are really catering for an adult reader. Now, a majority of the people who purchase YA books are adults, but I would like to see a return to at least just increase the number. It doesn't mean don't publish the range, but we need to publish more books that are really targeted for proper teenagers. And exactly, don't judge books that hit that sweet spot by this weird metric of this needs to appeal to me specifically, a 35-year-old person or what have you. It's definitely something I see and also frustrates me. But I think to truly address it, we gotta have some real soul-searching conversations a lot of people don't want to have, including like just sometimes the stuff I see editors buy, I'm like, do you know teenagers? Like, and this is like tangentially related, but the shade. You shouldn't read young kids books, teen books, because you should expand your vocabulary by reading a book your age. So I'm gonna take this to mean that this is really for, I assume, writers, though I guess everyone could stand to expand their vocabulary, and that they basically mean like adults should read adult books. And that's spicy, but I do agree, at least in the sense that if you're a writer, obviously if you're writing for a YA audience, you should read a ton of YA. But I think that reading outside of that category is just good for you, period. I think it's good to read a variety, read nonfiction, read adult genre fiction. I don't think it's strictly a vocabulary thing. I think that's a weird way to think about it. But yeah, I do think it's a good idea to just expand your reading, period. But also because this does kind of dance around the idea that, oh, YA books are dumbed down, like they're not written on that higher level. And we know that's not always true. There's a wide range of what you'll find in YA books. So like, because of that, yeah, you should read widely, because like, YA books can have that expanded content as well, so you should be reading a lot of different kind of books to inform your taste. I think there's a lot of shade meant there, and I just interpreted that very fairly, but that's who I am. Too many people, especially on YouTube, look to books as a moral compass for themselves. They criticize an author for the actions of their characters without thinking about why the character was written this specific way. This isn't to say an author can't tell on themselves through the characters they write. So true, which I'll tell you as an author, it kind of ruins some books for you once you know an author and you see archetypes in their books and you go, but I digress, that's not the point. I agree, I have seen troubling patterns in readership expecting just the moral demands that they place on books and characters, and the way that certain the buzzword morally gray, anti-hero, anti-heroine types, even just where they'll say you can't have that thing in the book, it's bad, completely ignoring the context that, you know, some books are artfully actually agreeing with you by putting it in the book. And if you read the book with context, you would see that. And I'm a writer who writes about some messed up stuff, so I completely agree with that. It's a frustrating trend I've seen in readership where things are just really taken on a surface level, and there are a lot of bad faith arguments written about what's okay to write about in a book. And so I totally agree with that. My side note there is, if you think I agree with all the bad things people do in the Ivies, you don't watch this channel. And if you do watch this channel, you understand the satire. Do not agree with the choices my characters make. Stop giving books you dislike high ratings because you feel bad for the author and want to pity rate them. That is why so many trash books have 4.5 stars on Goodreads, and it's annoying. I completely agree. I brought this up in the Goodreads video. This is an unpopular opinion. This is something that's hard to talk about. We're not gonna name specific books. I agree. We've all seen it where you just scratch your head at where some books fall on the rating scale and you're like, and then you read the reviews and it's the phenomenon of the 3-star review that reads like a 1-star and the 5-star review that reads like a 3-star. So I agree. Unless you want to pity rate my books 5 stars, go ahead. No, but my books are way lower than a 4.5, so I don't think people are pity rating me 5 stars. Yeah. I don't like how thriller is kind of used as a catch-all term in YA for books with murder mystery elements in them. Some books marketed as thrillers are just straight up murder mysteries, and while I know thriller in YA is just an all-encompassing term, a lot of people don't, and I think that can lead to murder mysteries getting unfair negative reviews just because the terminology YA uses to describe them. Yes, 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 yes. I have it on my short list to finally make a video on what even is a thriller, because the industry calls everything a thriller, and it bothers me as a writer too. I have suffered from this problem as well, where people criticize the pacing and it's like, they call everything a thriller. This is more of like a suspense thriller mix or mystery suspense mix. My next book is a straight up mystery suspense. And I know I'm gonna get dinged for it because it's gonna be called a thriller no matter what. I agree completely, and this is not just a YA problem, this is a problem in adult as well. Things will be labeled thrillers and you start to read them, you're like, no, this is slow burning suspense. I like slow burning suspense, but it's not a thriller. And we also get these weird nebulous lines where books that are horror will be called thriller and vice versa, and horror and thriller can have elements in common but aren't the same. Genres are a whole ass mess, and I think thriller gets the shortest shrift. It's a shorthand marketing term that can sell a lot of books, but agree, I think it leads to a bait and switch situation that can really disappoint people. So it is why it's important to read the back cover copy and understand tropes, because it can give you a clue. Like if you read something where you're like, I think this is a small town secrets book, 9 times out of 10 it's not gonna be a breakneck thriller. Because pacing. So yeah, I agree. And thriller bookish opinions were a theme, or certainly a theme I picked out of what y'all submitted. Thriller books that are actually great are very hard to come by. True. Some of this I think of course is down to taste, but yeah, I would say, so for example, if you strictly want a thriller and you're not into domestic suspense, psychological suspense, the market doesn't have a ton of books for you. And I'd say especially in YA, I'm a very picky reader in YA, and there are very few YA books I would say really count as thrillers. I agree. I hate that thriller slash horror are often grouped together. I understand why, but I'm a huge horror fan and I don't like thrillers. I keep trying. To me, there is a huge difference. I would agree horror has certain genre hallmarks that thriller doesn't have, though as I said, a horror could have thriller elements, but yes. And to that end, as a thriller lover, I do hope you find thrillers you like, but it might actually be because of all the genre confusion that you're picking up things that aren't paced the way that you like them, so yeah. Next is a ton of traditional publishing shade. You know I live for it, and I am here for this. Too many books are suffering from same book cover syndrome due to all being in the same art style. Yes, 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 yes. I was complaining about this cover trend more than a year ago. It hasn't changed, it's gotten worse. Like, I browse NetGalley or lists of books coming out in 2022 on Goodreads, and I look at the covers and I'm like, so many of these blend together and look like other books. I would also say it makes it doubly important for authors to be on their title game, because it's like the combination. If you're gonna have an art style that looks like someone else, let's hope that your title stands out. Honestly, I think YA cover, like, there has to be a reckoning soon. It's saturated, it's really bad. I go into bookstores and I have trouble finding books and telling them apart. Why are so many books on the New York Times bestseller list actually awful? I read them always hoping they'll be good, and most of the time they're written so poorly and the plots are so predictable. It feels like you don't even have to be a good writer to be a successful author. Is it all just politics and games? You know how I feel about the New York Times bestseller list. It is a lot of politics, it is a lot of games. I think it's a pro and a con that you don't have to be the best writer to be a successful author. Like, it takes some of the snobbery out of it. However, if a reader only buys New York Times bestsellers, you're not necessarily reading the best books that are out there. There are so many gems that simply, they don't get the push from their publishers, so they're never gonna list, or the timing is wrong. Like, yeah. You gotta go beyond the New York Times bestsellers to find the books that are gonna work for you. And yes, I have also picked up a bestseller or two where I thought the writing was atrocious, but it's also subjective. So I have found that some readers, the writing really, really matters. And I'm definitely that kind of reader. I just get like distracted by certain things in writing where like I have trouble moving forward. It's a style thing, and I have found that a lot of readers just literally don't care. They're story first, writing second. And so I think it also depends on the readership. Sounds like the person who submitted this is like me and is a very writing first kind of reader, but I have found time and time again that a lot of people are story first and writing second. So if your first trad pub book bombs, then you're done forever. No, 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 no. This is a pragmatic warning that your debut can matter. But I just have far too many examples of personal friends where this just isn't true. I have friends whose debuts really didn't do well, or certainly comparatively didn't do as well as others. And they, like me, have been on an upward career trajectory. Now, it is kind of an alchemy thing of who your agent is, how badly you fail, where you fail, and how much they paid for your book, whether anyone noticed that you failed, so to speak, and what your next book is. The number one thing you can do as an author, you know what, if you feel that creeping sense that your debut ain't it, you gotta go hard on book 2, especially if you're not on contract. Even if you are on contract, you, the author, have some measure of control and choices of what you work on, and there are ways to overcome this. I have a friend who didn't bomb with their debut, but was published with a much smaller publisher, and their debut was definitely very, very, very under the radar. And their next book came out from a big 5 publisher, did pretty well, and they are now in a really great career stretch. So your first book is never the end. It can go poorly, but it really sucks if your first book bombs, but you are not done forever. This next one, I condensed a very long comment down to kind of like Can we talk about agents behaving badly? Shitting on authors, commenting on discourse that has nothing to do with them, participating in public gossip and subtweeting like an angsty teenager, visibly frothing at the mouth at any and all opportunity to call something or someone out. A bitter and defensive anger I have not myself felt since I was 14 and on Tumblr. I do not want to be represented by someone who does not treat their public profile with the same professionalism they would expect of mine. They are perfectly within their right to be as shitty as they please on their private LiveJournal accounts. Now that's a deep cut. But I don't want to cringe and hold my breath when talking to an agent to whom my best interest is not paramount. I can't say I disagree with you, and I'll say to do what I know you're probably doing. Don't query those agents. And I know it really is hard for us because the ones on Twitter are really visible to us, but I agree. Pay attention to how they conduct themselves, and if they do things that make you uncomfortable that you wouldn't want turned around on you, / you don't want to have an agent who ends up embroiled in a scandal, definitely avoid those agents. Because I mean, I'll say, yeah, if you see that an agent is doing something publicly that you certainly would never do yourself, your values don't align, so you probably are not going to work well together in a business sense. Next, and possibly the diciest unpopular opinions, second only to the Authortube opinions, although it's a tight heat and it's why they're last. I've kept you watching this long, saved the best for last. Self-publishing opinions. Self-pubbed authors are often more zealous about their choice and will skip the negative sides to self-publishing when advising others. This is definitely something I have noticed. Too many writers settle for self-publishing when they realize how ruthless tradpub can be, even if they aren't a good fit for self-publishing. Self-publishing should never be a plan B after plan A fails. I agree and disagree with this one. I do think that many people do turn away from traditional publishing because it can be so ruthless and it's like a self-protection thing, which I completely understand. It can chew you up inside. It's really rough. And it can lead to some people self-publishing when they're themselves or their book might not be the best fit for the self-publishing market. And really all things with publishing choices comes down to you really do have to do your research and know the market and make the best possible decision for you and your book. And self-publishing should not be a default because tradpub is scary. So I do agree generally that it's not a great idea to have self-pub as a plan B to tradpub without a lot of thought going into it. But that said, it can be a good plan B. I think that every situation is individual. I do agree with that in the sense of self-publishing shouldn't always be a plan B. In many cases, self-publishing should be a plan A. Like, it really is the best path for a lot of books and a lot of authors, especially certain markets that do better in self-publishing than traditional publishing. So I agree with that sentiment. However, I give the advice to a lot of people that if you have a project and it's ready to go, you might as well query it if you are interested in traditional publishing and see how it goes. And if you have done the research and the market potential is there and you feel that you have the resources to self-publish well, it can make a good plan B. So I think this one's just nuanced. Next, while self-publishing does offer a challenge to traditional publishing, overall the quality of self-published books is lower than those traditionally published. Not necessarily for lack of talent or concept, but overwhelmingly because of lack of editing or received external advice from professionals with years of experience. To think self-pub will dethrone trad anytime soon is trite. I don't know if trite is the word they really meant there, but I think they must mean like not gonna happen. And similar to that, so part of that, the vast majority of self-published books aren't at the quality of traditionally published ones. As you know from the last Unpopular Opinions video, which probably sparked this unpopular opinion, I also agree that self-pub is not gonna dethrone traditional publishing. And I would also agree theoretically with the part of this, I mean, I said it a minute ago, that people need to really think about self-publishing before they self-publish and make sure that they take all of the necessary steps to prep and polish their books, because there are really well packaged and published self-published books, and those should be the books that you were aiming to be like. I got a lot more than just those two opinions. There was a lot of unpopular opinions that just like from a volume perspective, a lot of self-published books just aren't delivering the quality. As you saw, there's similar shade in the tradpub section that there are a lot of tradpub books that aren't good. I think it's speaking to the point that you have to put a lot of work in to get a book up to publication standard, regardless of your path. And both sides can have books that people really don't like. Self-publishing gives me MLM vibes at times. There's so many books and courses being sold that it feels like there's more money to be made off marketing a lifestyle to self-publishers than actually self-publishing. Hashtag girlboss. This has some crossover with some of the spicy opinions about Authortube. I think this is because this is a vibe that comes off a lot of entrepreneurial spaces that are specifically women driven. So yeah, it is definitely something you see. But that said, I mean, I'm obviously not in the self-publishing space. I'm gonna assume the person who put in this unpopular opinion knows that space really well. I've only seen some courses. I'm sure it's rampant if I went digging, but some of the ones I've seen, like Heart Breathing's course, I've gone, oh yeah, that sounds like a really good course that if I were self-publishing, I would do something like that, because I think there's something to be said for having like people who have successfully done something walk you through it. But I'm sure that there's the same potential for MLM style scamminess as there is in a lot of spaces, which brings me to the Authortube unpopular opinions. Most of the courses Authortubers sell online are unintentional scams. A lot of Authortubers don't have the experience or education to be charging, but they don't realize how shady what they're doing is because so many viewers request it and so many others are doing it as well. A lot of the Authortubers selling these courses on publishing are going to be really embarrassed in the future by how unethical what they're doing really is when it all comes to light. I have expressed this opinion before, gently to be fair, years ago, and people got real mad at me for not being positive. I am inclined toward this just because I'm of the personal philosophy that I think most information, general information, should be made available for free. There are of course levels of things that it makes complete sense to charge for if it makes sense for the writer and they have the bandwidth, especially anything that's offering personal guidance and one-on-one instruction, workshopping level type stuff. I think that workbooks can be really useful to a lot of people, and I don't fundamentally like have an issue with a lot of that. I do agree that when we see it to a certain scale, it can get out of control. And what I would say to the whole, like, they're gonna be embarrassed later when they look back on it, yeah, they might be, and I think that we should offer people grace if they have made that mistake in the past. I think it's easy to get really caught up in the furor of things, like other people are doing it and it looks like so much fun. It can also be a function of age, and not having a lot of experience. It can also just be that someone can be in a position where they really need a side income and they want to try something, and they might regret it later. And I do try to give those people the grace to go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that thing. But it is true that I personally am really, really wary of things where people are offering a lot of paid things on the side. But that's me personally. But it is true that I do worry about aspiring writers being taken advantage of in general, no matter what the space is. And so I do hope that people can be very conscientious consumers, be careful before you spend your money on things. And any creator who has some sort of platform or audience just has to be really, really thoughtful when it comes to offering paid services in any way, because you can end up taking advantage of people. So you have to be careful. This one is spiritually similar to some of the self-publishing opinions as well. A lot of Authortubers pick the wrong form of publishing for themselves because of inadvertent peer pressure. There's a bigger bend towards self-publishing on Authortube, and so many people end up going that route simply because it feels like everyone else is doing it. They hurt themselves in the long run because they don't have the skills, resources, or stories that excel there, and more Authortubers should try for traditional publishing. I would say this is definitely something I have observed as well, and if more people want to try traditional publishing, join us. We have cookies, kind of. Sad cookies. Anyway. Next, some real shade. Most Authortube creators don't actually write well. This is actually not as unpopular as you think it is. A lot of people feel this way. Obviously, I have a horse in the race, so I cannot pass comment on this, but I got a lot of these, and I think I think your mileage may vary. Yeah. Next, book deals do more to promote Authortube channels than Authortube channels sell books. Obviously from the trad pub side, I can definitely agree with this. I think that getting a book deal can really do something to elevate your Authortube channel. If you are a traditionally published Authortube channel, like you are showing that side, because it's like a proof of concept kind of thing. And so it is true in the sense of like, if you're starting a channel, you're more likely to really start to see growth if you also get a book deal. I think there's a correlation there. More than Authortube channels promote sell books. I mean, you know how I feel that like Authortube channels can sell books, but you really can't go into it with that expectation because they will never sell what you think they're gonna sell. It just like the economy of scale isn't there. I would agree that like if you have a book deal, people may find your channel and that may grow your channel more than your Authortube channel would independently sell books. And it is really funny because I've definitely gotten the conception, like literally had people comment at me that like, oh, I'm only getting book deals because of my Authortube channel. And you like do not understand how little traditional publishing cares about this channel. Like they really barely know that this is a thing. They barely understand YouTube half the time. Like, trust me, traditional publishing does not care that I have an Authortube channel. It's like this nice bonus of like, oh great, you can handle a ton of the marketing yourself. Great. Great, there's that side of it, but it's no like, oh, we should give her book deals because of her channel. None of us with Authortube channels are getting book deals because of YouTube. Like, it's just, no, we're not TikTok stars. Group writing sprints. It's just the creators chatting the whole time and I have no problem with that, but it's impossible to concentrate. I always join sprints thinking I'm going to get work done while supporting Authortubers, but then I always end up turning it off because everyone keeps talking instead of sprinting. I wasn't expecting a personal call out. I'm so guilty of this, but I feel like we know this, that if you come to writing sprints or productivity sprints on my channel, that half the battle is getting me not to talk, but I've gotten better at inviting people to stream with me and have people in the comments who will make me do the darn sprints. Do the darn sprints. That said, I think the reason I do mine like that, I think it's just different schools of thoughts. It's whatever reason you're going to sprints for. I personally like chatty sprint lives. The ones that I watch, I like it when they're chatty because I'm not just there for the sprints. I'm there because I like the people who are streaming. If I want less chatty sprints, I do know that those exist and I know who does them. Like during the World Write-a-thon, like you'll see the ones where they're really, really good at staying focused and mostly just sprinting. And you can go, oh, I can go to those for those. But since I like chatty ones, I clearly also do it. Called out. More people should be subscribed to Lindsay Puckett. Why aren't more people subscribed to Lindsay Puckett? I don't get it. She's so sweet and funny and talented. Pay attention to this beautiful writing angel. This isn't really an unpopular opinion, but like damn. I just think she's great and more people should watch her videos. I did ask Lindsay if that was hers, and it's not. So I agree with you, stan of Lindsay Puckett. Lindsay is fantastic, and if you're not already subscribed to her channel, you should definitely check her out. And you're right, this is not an unpopular opinion. We agree with you. And last but not least, a literal personal call out. Alexa Donne should post more writing vlogs. Thank you. The irony with me waiting 2 months to film this is I've posted some more writing vlogs since this went up. I do need to get better at posting them more frequently, like breaking them up, but like I did one whole one for my dev edits, which meant there was like a 2-month gap, but like line and then copy were shorter, so you're getting them sooner, so that was part 1 of your unpopular writing, bookish, and Authortube opinions. Like I said, there's at least 200 more for me to go through, so I will at some point go through, pick out some more of the highlights, and we will do another one. You know I want to know down below in the comments, which one of these set you off? Which ones do you agree with, disagree with? What's got you hot under the collar? Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and I will do part 2. Let's hold it hostage for likes. Kidding. You know I do whatever I want to do. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and happy writing.